Hi folks, yesterday I put up a video in which I tried to quote Charlotte Joko Beck, who I had remembered saying in some book that we all have just enough suffering. A couple of people emailed me after that and said that maybe I got the quote from Shunryu Suzuki, who made a kind of a similar quote in which he said we all have just enough problems. Could be, I don't know. But the point of what I was saying was more about we all have enough problems rather than we all have enough problems. But I did talk about comparative suffering, so I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. And what I'm about to say is mostly based on a blog I put up today, and I'll link to that below. So if you want to read it, it's probably a little better than what I'm going to say out of my blabby mouth. When this idea that you can't compare suffering comes up, a lot of people object to it, and I get that, because when I first started hearing it, I objected to it too, and I kind of did the same thing. But look, I am 55 years old. I know I look youthful and spry, but I'm really an old dude. My mom, when she was 55 years old, was already experiencing some of the worst effects of Huntington's disease. And in case you don't know about Huntington's disease, you can go Google it, but somebody I recently saw on the internet compared it to having Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Lou Gehrig's disease all at the same time. And from what I saw of my mother, that would be about right. So it's pretty bad. And she, as it turns out, had another 10 years to go with the disease getting progressively worse each year until she died in her sleep when she was 65. Now I'm 55, and I haven't shown any signs of Huntington's disease at all. And basically, if you haven't shown signs by the time you're 40, the chances are you don't have the gene, although I could be a late bloomer for all I know, so it still worries me. But any sensible person would say that I, at age 55, am suffering far less than my mother was at age 55, and I would have to agree with that. In fact, I think my life is pretty good, all things considered, and I don't really have anything significant to complain about. Now, the common thing that people do when they criticize this Zen idea that you can't compare suffering is they'll pick out some incredible case of suffering, either something they read in the news or something they made up, and they'll compare it to something trivial. And then they'll say, you can't say that these kind of sufferings are the same. Like they'll say, what if a nice little old lady stepped on a rusty nail while she was trying to outrun a flood, and at the same time she was having a load of bowling balls dropped on her head from a police helicopter that exploded just above her, that was carrying those bowling balls to a charity bowling tournament for disabled veterans. And you're saying that you got a hangnail and that's exactly the same? Well, no, it's not. But usually people who make this argument are deadly serious, so they don't make a funny version, they make a really tragic version, and I don't even want to try to imitate that. If you want to see a little bit, I believe there's some in the comments of my last video, unless the people who put them up took them down. And the intention is to show that yes, some suffering is worse than others, and maybe it is. But even so, comparing your suffering doesn't really help anything. For example, the first time I went to the hospital with a kidney stone, the doctor asked me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10. And the question kind of threw me for a moment, because how do I know what the objective scale of the maximum amount of pain a human can have is? Do I actually rate a 10? And then I realized, well, this doctor doesn't know that either, so he just wants me to give my subjective experience, and so I told him it was a 10 because it really hurt. But can we rank our subjective feelings of suffering against what we think other people are suffering? I suppose we can, but does it help them? Does it help us? Like, say I'm watching the news and I see that there was an earthquake in Rhodesia, and it's really terrible. These buildings are toppled and there's films of people screaming in the streets and everything looks horrible. And I'm just slouching there on my sofa with a bag of Fritos and a joint from the local dispensary maybe, going, whoa, those people are suffering a lot worse than I am. And probably they are. I would not dispute that. But what can I do about it? Like, I could log into PayPal and find a Rhodesian relief organization and send them some money. Or, if I'm really determined, I could just get out there, go to LAX, hop on an airplane to Rhodesia and dig through the rubble trying to find survivors. And I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that. I'm sure I would help some people if I did that. But it can't help everyone in the world who's suffering. Like, maybe there's a tsunami in Indonesia on the same day, or maybe there's a nuclear meltdown in Afghanistan and the news doesn't even report it. How much money do I have in my PayPal account? And can I, maybe I should make a chart and try to rank the relative suffering of each event that I see on the news, and then dole out my PayPal money to, in increments that match up with the rank that I've assigned each amount of suffering. But then what happens when I completely drain my PayPal account and then I'm watching TV and another disaster comes on? Now, I'm not trying to advocate for complacency. I'm not saying we can't do anything because we can't do everything. But what I am trying to say is that our usual way of understanding these sorts of things by ranking them doesn't make any sense. I think the best thing I can do is to understand that these things don't make any sense and that I'll never be able to make sense out of them. But I also want to try to help where I can. I can't possibly know all the suffering in the world, and I can't possibly relieve all the suffering in the world, but I can see things in my immediate vicinity and try to do something about those things. And I will always, always feel guilt and shame and sadness that I didn't do enough to help my mother when she was ill. At the time, I thought, well, there's nothing I can do for her, which in a sense is true because I couldn't magically heal her or anything. And even though I thought maybe I might be able to develop those powers, I actually had that fantasy while I was doing my Zazen for a time. But it didn't happen. However, I could have been there, I could have stayed around. The height of her illness coincided with my deepest Zen practice with Nishijima Roshi in Japan, when I was going to a lot of retreats and where I was really, really dedicated to practicing Zen. Now, I could have instead decided to move back home and be near my mom, and probably her last days might have been a little bit happier knowing that I was just sleeping upstairs every night. But then again, hardcore Zen would have never been written if I'd done that. I probably wouldn't be doing this YouTube channel. I might be doing a YouTube channel about Ultraman or something, I don't know. But I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be going to Europe doing all these retreats and things that I'm going to do starting a week and a half from now. None of that would be happening. Was I wrong not to rank her very real, severe suffering over my trivial existential angst? Honestly, I don't know. I can't make that judgment. Maybe some people can make that judgment. Maybe some of those people who left those comments would say, well, yeah, the world would be better off and Buddhism would be better off without you talking about it. And maybe they're right. I don't really know. But after thinking about it for a while, and after living with it for a while, and after meditating on it for a long, long time, I've come to the conclusion that the Zen people were right, that it doesn't make any sense to try to rank suffering. Of course, I could be wrong. And that's what I got to say for today. I will be going to Europe in a week and a half, and here are the places I'll be. That place I'm going in Finland is spelled with only one M, but I haven't had a chance to change it on this thing yet. So just be aware, don't go to the one with two M's. All of these events are open to anybody who wants to come. Please show up. You are welcome to be there. And as I said yesterday, I will probably make just a little bit more money than I spend when I'm in Europe. That's what seems to happen every year. So I still do depend on your PayPal and Patreon donations. That's really how I make my living. And I really, really thank you very much for continuing to support me, even though I'm saying these unpopular things. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Bye.